I know that's a lot to digest, so if you could look at slide 8, I think this will make it a little clearer. So the customer bill today looks something like this. This happens to be a residential bill. So you can see that there's a monthly service charge, there's an energy charge, and then there's the line called power cost recovery that's been blown up in a little box. This particular customer also participates in Helping Hand. So at the end of this month, they owe $257 for their bill. If you'll flip to the next slide, I'll show you in an illustrated form what this change would look like for the customer. So the left-hand table here is exactly the numbers that we were just looking at. The right-hand table is the proposed rates. So you can see that the monthly service charge is the same. The energy charge, now called distribution charge, has changed by a nickel. The power cost recovery factor, now called generation transmission, has increased by that same nickel. The end result is the same $257 bill.
Well, when you go and start replacing, when you have a bunch of the old poles,
Yes, sir.
is that where that price goes into?
This nickel?
The nickel, that general generating?
No, the funds that Phelps uses for paying salaries, capital projects,
Pole
pole replacements, that's generated from the service charge and the distribution charge only. So it's the minority part of this bill is funding all of our activity. The majority part of the bill is passed through to our wholesale supplier and those others that are in our industry, transmission owners, regulatory, et cetera. Did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
So we're doing this, like I said, the intent is so that the customer can clearly see this is what Phelps uses and operates on versus this is what's being passed through, and also where those changes, when they happen periodically, but they can see it's on the generation and transmission side, not our rates that we're using. The second part of the conversation here is reactive power support fee. If you look at this, slide 10. If you recall on slide 5, I talked about the under collection for the cogeneration customers. And we're forecasting this to get worse, not better, as more customers come on and the systems get bigger. We need to eliminate the cross-subsidization from commercial accounts, residential accounts, to anyone that has distributed generation. So what we're proposing is adding this reactive power support fee. And I'm going to try not to be too much of an engineer here, so bear with me. But this is going to be applied only to customers that have distributed generation. The fee is there because the reactive energy that we provide today to customers, we don't measure or collect. But a distributed generation customer is still using this, and it becomes much more difficult for us to supply that. So the cost that we're recommending in this is to collect that piece of what we're doing for those customers, and make the system whole, make them where it's not subsidized by other groups. We can be penalized as utility by ERCOT if we don't meet certain criteria. So we built into the support fee, if we ever got to that point, that would be added to the calculation. Our plan is not to go there, and we're going to do a good job to avoid that, but it is possible. So,
who is reactive power people? Is the way I read this. Air conditioner units, refrigerators, that's homeowners.
Items that are motors, fundamentally, it's the easiest way to think about it. A refrigerator has a motor
So we're going
component
to
to it.
add charges for stuff like that?
It's, in order for that device to run, you have to have, pardon me for the energy, you have to have a real part of the energy and a reactive part of the energy. And when they're putting their solar piece in, they're only providing the real. Phelps is still providing the reactive.
So this is only for the solar?
This would be only for distributed generation. In our case, it's 100% solar customers, yes.
Okay.
Yes. But if you don't have that component, motors don't run.
Right.
It's physics.
Is that the ground you're talking about?
The ground, no.
What do you mean react?
How many solar customers do you have that use this?
We have 46 customers as of today and 6 in flight.
Council, I would remind you, that would just give me another signal if I can. Thank you.
Okay, I hope I didn't get too far off in the weeds there, but this, is, like I said, the reactor supply is what we're working on here. So if you look at slide 11, what we're
Ours are numbered a little bit different than your slides.
this one is titled, it's the second one titled Reactive Power Support Fee.
Okay.
The first bullet is how is the reactive power support fee determined? So this is how did we come up with the charge that we're proposing? When a customer comes to Phelps today to install a solar system on their house, we have an application process, and ultimately, if it gets to an agreement, then that customer is connected. So we get what their nameplate rating is of their system, and we, execute, do the technical things we need to do, changing meters, etc. So what we're proposing is that based on that information, that on the nameplate, we'll charge $1.02 per kW. So that if I choose to put in a system that's 5 kW, my charge would be $5.10. If my neighbor decided to put in a system that was 20 kW, 4 times as big, their cost would be 4 times as much at $20.40 a month. And so what this will encourage is folks to put in right-sized systems for their house, their business, whatever it happens to be, instead of making a giant. I'm hoping that that's making sense for everyone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you gonna help them do design or get them to design and help them pass their bank so they don't put a big load on your power? I see where you're going with the loads.
We're putting the capacitor bank for them.
Oh, okay, cool, okay.
That's what the charge is ultimately going to cover, is that we base this $1.02 on what our actual cost we think will be to support that incremental change.
Oh,
So instead of asking the homeowner to do it, which is very difficult to do, Phelps is taking that role, and here's your share of the cost.
oh, they need to pay for it.
Right. Right. The other thing that this is doing is helping the under collection. And I want to go back to that because if we continue down this road, and I just want to echo one other fact to Councilman Silva. 2 years ago, we had 6 customers install solar systems. The year after was 13, it doubled. This year's on track to double again. At this rate, we need to address this today so that we don't have customers that are some struggling to pay the bill that are now really paying for me to have solar that they can't potentially afford. So it's very important to address this so we don't have that subsidization. Other questions? So if you could flip to the next one, what does this mean for our customers? We are working diligently to not change our rates. We haven't changed them since 2014, and right now we're thinking we can get through 2018, probably 2019 without a rate change. So that's a pretty good track record of 5 or 6 years with no rate change. We're recommending that, of course, like I said, the change of the 5 cents from the energy cost to the PCRF, or in the future called generation transmission. And we're asking to implement the reactive power support fee for just distributed generation customers. So I guess in summary here, if you look at the last slide, we're proposing that nickel be moved, and that the RPSF be implemented for DG customers. I hope that you received the draft ordinance and the proposed rates, that this permeates through all of them. I know I talked about residential only, but it applies to every one of them the same way. And I would ask for your positive consideration and favorable vote, and this would be applied, assuming that to be the case, on the first bill in January. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, going through, I don't know what page, outdoor recreational lighting.
Yes, sir.
You have a $30 monthly charge. Is that like a basketball court, skate parks, or is that schools? What is that? Doesn't explain. It's outdoor.
Outdoor lighting, you hit it with the first couple. So if you have a football stadium that's outdoor, softball field, basketball court that's outdoor, that's what that rate applies to.
Okay, then your security light services, does that fall in under our street lights, or is it the, there's a couple of them in there, sort of your city lighting services, that is street light?
The city lighting services applies only to the cities, obviously one of those. And that would be if your city manager called us up and said, I'd like you to install a new street light at Main and First, that rate is used. Security light is really for a customer. They would like a pole and a light set on their property, that's what the security light is.
And I see that the city light stuff is going more LEDs now.
We have made a choice that that's what our standard will be.
Cool. And definition wasn't really.
Right. Any other questions I might be able to
Yes,
answer?
So for these solar customers, and it is doubling, I understand in the solar industry, the cost to construct has become much cheaper. So as systems are more viable to be bigger and customers may potentially be adding power to the grid, do you have a system in place for that, or is that case by case?
We have a process for it. So if I can use you as an example, let's say that you decide to put a 10 kW system on your home, on your roof. You come to Phelps, or you could get our application off the internet, fill out the application, it goes through the process. Ultimately, we haven't refused any at this point. There's not been a size that's been a problem. We've come to a point we have an agreement. In the meantime, you're working with your contractor. When it gets to the very end, we actually come out and change your meter out, because we have to put a meter in that reads in both directions, meaning I'm delivering to the customer and I'm receiving energy from the customer. Meters today don't do that for tampering regions. So we actually make those changes, but that's all part of the process and explaining the process.
Any other questions for Mr. Duke? Any other comments?
Hope for a favorable vote.
Okay, we are looking at council consideration and action to accept the recommended cost of service rate and adjustment. Any citizens' comments at this moment? Here, just go ahead and state your name for us.
Yeah, good evening again, Mayor and council members and staff. My name is Roy Agrett, live here in Floresville, and I got a question for the thought people. Number one, some of it have been answered, like apparently the customer is actually selling electricity to the utility company by the reversing. Okay. On the, due to the tax credit from the federal government, they need more people putting the people, they don't pay, they get it out of the tax. The other question is, on the billing from the utility company, do they pay a percentage to the city of their revenue?
The percentage that's paid to the city is only done annually, so it's not, and it's not done, it's flat. The fee that collects, the city's collecting from Phelps each month this year was based on last year's performance of the company, not an individual bill.
So, that percent, what about how much is that percentage that is paid to overseas?
Phelps, as long as I have known, pays 3% to each of the cities, or a total of 3% split to each of the cities annually. So the city of Floresville gets its 64% of 3%. So we do that. We've done that for as long as we there's no.
It's good to know that. The reason I'm asking that question is because the city of San Antonio, CPS paid 12% to the city in lieu of taxes. And what I mean is that CPS is not owned by the city of San Antonio, and therefore they might never own it because they always own money and pay, instead of paying the tax on it, they just charge the customer 12% of their bill. So if my bill is $100, I get a bill for $112. So 3% is a very minimal. I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other citizens' comments? Okay, if no further comments, I would entertain a motion, consideration and action to accept recommended cost of service rate and adjustment.
I'll make a motion to approve the recommended cost of service rate and adjustment as presented.
I have a motion on the floor by Councilman Silva. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilman Nissen. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Duke.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to item 3C, consideration action to implement water rate increase as recommended by the water rate study. We have Raul Gonzalez, also Helen Martinez.
Good evening. I know I'm not on the agenda, so I'll be very quick, but I just wanted to give you a short introduction of what Raul Gonzalez does for the city of Floresville. He has 12 years of cost accounting and rate study experience. 3 out of the 12 years he's done the rate study for the city of Floresville. He does a great job. He's very thorough and detailed. And I would just like you to know that we need to appreciate what he does. Communities Unlimited is a nonprofit organization, and he does this rate study at no cost to the city of Floresville. Also, it's a requirement through the USDA water loan that we have these rate studies to ensure that we make sufficient revenue to cover all the expenditures and to prove to the auditors or whoever comes and sees our work that we're sound and we have a good financial position. So I'm going to let Raul do the presentation, and then later on, if you want me to, I have prepared a spreadsheet that has the historical data for the water rate since 1994. If y'all want me to do that, let me know, and I'll pass out a spreadsheet now while Raul's doing his presentation.
I think so. I think that would help.
Thank you very much. And good evening. Like Helen said, we're a nonprofit corporation, and we have a national contract with USDA to provide this free technical assistance to all their existing borrowers and applicants. Of course, the city has a choice to either use our services or hire their own great consultant. I'm just going to give you a quick summary of how we approach this rate analysis. Basically, regardless if the city asked for the rate study or whether it was a referral from the USDA or maybe even the TCEQ, which is your primacy agency, we begin by looking at your latest audit information, and which I did. It was provided by your staff. And if you look in worksheet number 3, USDA, once you become a borrower, They ask you to send in your audits annually every year, and they input the information into this database that they have. And the purpose of that database is to track your financial sustainability, and that's what these ratios are. If you look from the top to the bottom, the current ratio, the debt coverage ratio, and the affordability ratio, that kind of stuff, basing yourself on reviewing these results from your 2016 audit, you're looking pretty good standing. There's, you had a positive, you had a 1.19 operating ratio, which is 19% over your expenses when you subtract depreciation. So looking at that, anyone in the audience or anyone with any background would say, man, you guys, your water system is paying for itself and you have some monies left over. The second bit of information that I collect is from your billing clerk. She did a great job in providing this information, and that's on worksheet number 5. We need about 12 months of information to understand and develop the rate study with regard to the amount of water that you sell, the average number of customers, and the average usage. In your water system, you average 2,618 active customers, and they use about 8,568 gallons per customer. The next thing we looked at is on worksheet number 7. I looked at your financials, I got the billing information. What else do we need to look at? And that's your USDA funding. This is what really triggered the rate study. We want to be sure that you have sufficient revenues to cover the proposed debt. The city applied with USDA for a 3.719 loan grant application, and you were granted a loan of $3.719. The repayment amortization per the USDA letter of conditions, 2/3 of the way down on the page, you're going to be making payments of $150,397 annually. But wait, there's more. Besides that, USDA always asks you to set aside 1 year's payment over a period of 10 years. And the purpose for that reserve is if something happens after those 10 years, something catastrophic like the hurricane people, tornado, whatever, you've got your money set aside to make your annual payment to USDA. So I have to include that element in the rate analysis. The other requirement in the USDA letter of conditions is what they call a short-lived assets reserve. And the engineer calculated that at $136,716. So remember, you're not only having to pay now the $150,397, you gotta set aside annually $15,040 for your debt reserve, and in addition, the short-lived assets of $136,716. The short-lived assets are assets that wear out in 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year increments. Pumps, things like that work. The USDA wants you to be self-sufficient. They don't want you to. This is a big operation. You have a first-class staff, first-class budget, good people in the financial department. I don't see you having a problem with that. But in some cases, you'd be surprised how some communities don't set aside any monies for any expenditures, and they have to go to a bank to borrow money just to replace a tractor or to replace a pump. So that's the purpose behind that. In addition, what I included that's not in the letter of conditions, it's a capital repair and replacement account. Just like your public works director was here earlier with a list of things that he wants to accomplish, you got to be setting aside some reserves
for those improvements, whether it's replacing a water line, a section of water line, or maybe a failing manhole that you need to replace, things like that. The next thing we look at is worksheet number 8. In most cases, it's not unusual, it's difficult for me to look at an audit and they should, that you know, in fact, you can look at your previous audits yourselves, you'll see a line item for water revenues, sewer revenues, solid waste, and then you see expenses below it and they're all grouped together. Well, how do I know how much of that is water expenses, how much of that is, so that we can address and allocate the costs appropriately? In this particular year, thanks to the financial people, they were very careful about separating the expenses for water and sewer, solid waste, whatever else. And so this worksheet I developed was for that purpose, for those audits that we don't have any information on. I just have to make a judgment as to how much is water, how much is sewer. But in this case, it was easy. I was able to determine your expenses for the water project. The next thing is on worksheet 9. This is kind of where I reconcile all your revenue requirements that we need to target. And if you look at the right, on the right-hand side column, you have the 2016 audit, and all those numbers should match your audit. But we're in 2017. I have to make a projection as to what your expenses are going to be this year. And so if you look at the 2017 column, I project like a 2% increase on your expenses all the way down. And if you look at 2/3 of the way down from the top, you're going to see 105,592. That's the capital repair and replacement reserve that we recommend based on 5% of your sales, 5 to 6% of your sales. It'd be like a funded depreciation. And then you've got the short-lived assets, which is required 136,716. Then you got your debt reserve that we talked about a little while ago at 15,000. So all that totals to 1.5 million. And when you compare that to your 2016 and 2017 projected revenues, you'll see a deficit of a negative of 101,061. So that's an indication already that your current rates will not cover the new debt, the debt reserve, the short-lived assets, the capital repair and replacement account. So turning to page 10, the next thing we look at is to try to get an idea as to what your base charge should be for your water. And those are called fixed and variable costs. Fixed costs are costs that you have to pay regardless if you're selling water or not. And that would be insurance. That would be, some examples would be insurance. It would be the USDA debt. Doesn't matter if you sell water or not, you're going to have that annual payment come around. Your reserves. Some of your staff will still have to be paid, whether you're selling water or not. Things like that. So, and variable expenses are expenses that varies with demand, such as utilities. Your utilities will probably go down if you don't sell that much water because your pumps aren't working as hard. And that's where the variable cost represents like your commodity charge. That would be like $5 per 1,000. That's what pays for that variable expense. Other examples would be chemicals, things like that. that are directly related to the variable cost. So at the very bottom, based on my calculations, you can see that your fixed costs average about $17.16. And when you compare that to your current base charge, I think the current base